for me, like that's why I fell in love with Passive House was just it is everything about it is nuts and bolts, making the buildings work better for the people that live inside of them, right? And for the environment.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Simke, coming to you from Seattle, Washington.
How are things in Seattle, Zach?
Things are good. It's fall. It definitely feels like fall now. How about for you? Do you like spring?
We have crazy Halloween advertising everywhere in springtime. It all makes perfect sense down here in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
We can get pumpkins. I'm not sure where they're coming from.
Those are high upfront carbon pumpkins.
High carbon pumpkins. Yeah. Along with those California oranges. Love them. Yeah. Anyway, we got a great interview to cover off this week, which took me back to Houston and a great house visit that we were both at, I think.
No, I missed it. Oh,
you missed it?
Yeah. So I met Jesse in Austin a few months ago, but I missed the connection in Houston. I was there in Houston, but I wasn't able to go to the tour.
There were a few of us. There were a few other from the Accelerator who got to go on the tour after the Houston Fairs conference, and that was a definite highlight. Was going and checking out Jesse's house. But we'll get into that in a little bit. We've got a few people to thank for everything we do at the Accelerator first.
We do indeed. So a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thanks to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwool North America, and Zola Windows. And thanks to our champion sponsors, Buizo, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, and Source 2050.
All right. Give us a bit of a quick intro to Jesse Hunt.
Yeah, well, Jesse just spoke at the Reimagine Buildings How to Decarb conference last week on Friday. And we are taping this on Thursday before it actually happened. So I'm sure it was great because I saw him present in Austin.
It's been awesome.
At the Humid Climate Conference, and he was really fantastic. He's got a great story. So Jesse is the founder of Emergent Development in Houston, Texas. He is the creator of the first FIA certified building in Houston, which we'll hear about in this conversation. He is also the chapter president of the FIAS Alliance Houston chapter, and he has taken the leap in he's like, all right, I'm going to make this happen. And that's what the story is about. I think it's so cool. And it's one that I think a lot of us in this community can take a kind of inspiration from and emulate. So enjoy.
Let's get into it.
All right. Jesse, thank you for joining me on the podcast, and I can't wait to hear and have you share your story with the audience. So thanks for carving out time.
Of course, yeah. The story goes back quite a ways, so it's kind of like where in the story do we want to begin? But most recently, and I think most, uh, I guess what's like most has most shaped the experience that I've had building, the first passive house project in Houston was just getting exposed to the industry. Well, I got exposed early. I was a framer and carpenter and did a little bit of that for summer jobs, but I got kind of snuck my way in the back door of commercial architecture about 8 years ago through sustainability. I got a degree in sustainability. And I've been working on certifications for buildings, essentially for commercial buildings for 8 years. And it didn't take very long to realize that those were not very robust certifications, that there wasn't a lot that we had fundamentally needed to change about our buildings in order for them to achieve, some sort of stature. And
Hmm.
that just didn't they didn't vibe too well with me, and just in terms of wanting to do better, both for society and the environment. And so that's kind of when I started looking deeper into like what was out there and what was going to be, higher performance before I kind of knew what high performance building was. And
Right.
I found Passive House and I was like, this checks off all of the boxes. It is true high performance. There is no checking of boxes. It's either, you lower the energy use, you lower the carbon intensity of your development, or you don't pass, right? It is a bit of a pass fail that way. And it also just economically makes tons of sense too. You're saving money for people in the long run. So anywhere I've always been interested in kind of how you make capitalism and environmentalism like mesh well. I think that's where we're gonna, make the largest strides in society and fighting climate change. And I think that Passive House is just one of those solutions, but it's a really good one to a really big problem, which is fixing the buildings that we're already operating and the new ones that we're going to be building. So that's kind of a
Yeah.
nutshell. I jumped in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the previous projects that you were working on
Yeah,
were sort of checklist based. I mean, it's probably like lead gold, that kind of
correct.
lead
Yep.
silver sort of, yeah, right.
100%. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, and you,
Um,
you check a lot of boxes, and it's not like there aren't a lot of things in a lead building that don't make a building better,
mhm.
but oftentimes they're not even visible. You can be getting points on projects that no one ever gets to realize the value of, be that the project team or even the occupants. And to me, sometimes I really question why time and money is being spent on something like that. So for me, like that's why I fell in love with Passive House, was just it is everything about it is nuts and bolts, making the buildings work better for the people that live inside of them, right? And for the environment.
Right. So when you discovered Passive House, did you get to work on Passive House? How did that,
Yeah,
what was that experience like?
I tried so hard to convince commercial clients to just trust me on this crazy idea, and those conversations ended very quickly. I think it's a combination of it being foreign and, concepts, and the word house is throwing a lot of people off as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
Even though I explained, hey, no, we're really just talking about building science here and improving the envelope and things of that nature. I think the fundamental problem with going after a client, an existing client with an existing project, is you weren't part of the calculus of the building when it was at inception. And like that step zero, that like first pen to paper, how does this deal gonna work before the land is ever bought, before the money is raised? Passive house has to be there, I think, as a concept for people. Otherwise, it's perhaps for most, too big of a hurdle to get over after the fact, especially just because it's not common nomenclature and it's not codified everywhere. And that's obviously changing in places like Massachusetts pretty quickly.
Hmm.
It's going to be quite a big culture shock. I think there probably already is a wave going out in the development community about that.
Yeah.
And I get these emails from developers across the country too, even when small code changes are happening. They're saying, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So I tried for a while, and I just knew like I have to be involved at phase zero. And so that's when I knew, hey, I have to be the developer on this first project. There's no other way it's going to get done in this town. So that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from there, and I had had some false starts. I've always been wanting to be an entrepreneur. I've just had that itch deep down inside of me. It
Hmm.
bothers me every day when I wake up that I'm not doing the thing that I think I'm meant to be doing.
Hmm.
And so this was sort of the jump off, and then it would have been way easier to build my first ground up house to code,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
But it was like never an option, and it was not interesting to do that. And I have to get up every day and be really excited about the challenge of whatever it's going to be. And so it was never allowed to be anything else other than a certified passive house project.
Right. Right.
So you have to make it work, and maybe that's a good thing. Like I didn't have any bad habits and or
Hmm.
preconceived notions about where money in a house is supposed to go. I just knew that the bottom line had to make sense. And so as long as the project is going to be profitable for my investors and for myself and anybody else working on the project, not even everybody has to know it's a passive house project, but you have to make it work and you make it work. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, you know?
So you were kind of banging your head up against this wall, over and over with trying to convince commercial clients, and so at a certain point you're just screw it, I'm going to just do this myself because
Correct.
then it can happen, which I think is something that probably can resonate with a lot of people in this community, right? I mean, we
Right.
because we get so passive house just makes sense, and why it just needs to happen, and depending on the market you're in, if you're not in Massachusetts,
Right.
and you're somewhere where nobody has done a passive house project yet,
Houston,
or
Texas,
yeah,
right?
right. It's like what else are you going to do?
Right.
And man, I bet you did not know what you're getting into, though.
I did and I didn't, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
okay.
and you do so much in the beginning to try to fix problems on paper before they get really expensive.
Hmm.
And that's what I preach, with clients moving forward is like we do spend a large amount of time really coordinating and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. So we don't get in the field and nothing costs more in a project than a project stopping, right? And then
Yeah,
or
yeah.
rework. So there is more to think about, there's just more, but it's for me, it's just intentionality.
Hmm.
But we did fix a lot on paper, but we also had to fix a lot in the field regardless. And that has to do with being green to, um, you know, some of the high performance like HVAC stuff. But it's not just my first project, it's also all of my installers' first project, right?
Right, right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, my HVAC installer, he's great. He's amazing, but he was doing a couple of things on this project he had not done before, or maybe
Hmm.
a specific way. And there was a little bit of figure it out. And then he'd never been held to like a third party rater coming in and making sure that everything's performing exactly to spec. And also, he doesn't do testing and balancing. No residential HVAC installer in Houston, Texas does testing and balancing. So I had to dip into the commercial world and go ask a contact of mine, hey,
Right.
will you come to a house?
Yeah.
And, yeah, sure. It'll take me a couple hours. I was like, that's it. He's like, you should see how big of projects I'm used to. This is not that bad. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that this could have gone worse than it did, I guess I should say.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, right, and you had your role in the commercial firm probably set
Sure.
you up. I imagine this wasn't
Yeah,
absolutely
and
brand new.
I think too, like you've got to get, especially in the development world, like I don't, is it a Warren Buffett ism where, when the sea goes out, you're going to see who's been swimming, naked.
Mm-hmm.
When push comes to shove and you're going to build the project, all of your weakest aspects are going to be exposed. Right.
Right.
And so for me, yes, I grew up doing some building and swinging a hammer, but like I am not a gifted builder. I knew I needed help with construction. And I found my partner, David Edgar, who had 30 years of building difficult
Mm.
to build projects in New York City, believe it or not, um, under his belt. And so I kind of have the people power, and I speak Spanish and have a lot of skills that he doesn't have. And so I really think too, it's important to know, like I said, what you don't know, or try to uncover that as much as you can, and fill in the blanks on your team, or pay for the expertise. And we do that so much in the form of consulting, right? So we pay a consultant because Lord knows I can't design an HVAC system
Right.
or do structural design, and you pay out for those things because that's just a quick way to pay for, pay your ignorance debt. And
Mm-hmm.
we do that in our lives everywhere. And you just have to know that on this project, especially when you're playing with OPM, other people's money, and you're also your own personal reputation is 100% on the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
First one has to be a success. That's really the only rule, is you have to succeed the first time so you can live again to do it again.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And that's it. You're always, I think it is a really, really good lesson in business, and it is business. Business is always just a survival game. Name me a business that has lasted for more than, 200 years or 100 years. If they did, it's very, very, very few. And it's because they're very used to reinventing themselves and fighting that fight. And whenever people give up fighting, that's when the business dies, right? And you got to do that on your development every single day. You're like, what am I fighting today?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Not for
And
the faint, not for the faint of heart.
not for the faint of heart. So I think if you're gonna do it, your why has to be so strong. It
Hmm.
it has to just be a fire that is like gonna eat you alive if you don't do it.
Yeah. Talk about that.
Sure.
What is it?
I mean, there's the classic solving of people, planet, and profit, thing that everybody talks about, but I think it has to go deeper than that. It has to be, um, you know, intriguing to you intellectually. It has to bother you at nighttime. It has to be
Mm.
something that you complain to your significant other about.
Yeah.
Um, things that like you really start to question, um, if you didn't do it, how would you feel about that? Like, could you live with yourself in 5 years, 10 years if you had never tried that one time?
Right.
Go, and the other thing too is failure, it won't kill you, right? You'll still wake up the next day and still be you and figure out a new path forward. But if you had never tried in the first place, you'll never know. And that would have eaten me alive. And it was eating me alive until I just said, all of this risk, you're going to feel it in your stomach. You're going to feel it before you start the project. You're going to feel it the first time you accept other people's money, the first time you close on a bank loan, the first time, products and materials and people start showing up to your job site and you're responsible for all of it. The first time you fail an inspection and then refail an inspection, and then the first time you turn on your HVAC equipment and it doesn't work for some reason and you don't know why, doesn't matter. You just figure it out and you keep moving forward, right? And I think that's all of life, and it's kind of it lives within, a project. It's
Right.
hard,
Right. It makes me think of Dennis Hayes is the president of the Bullet Foundation. I think maybe he's retired by now. It's a really, really close to retirement anyway. And the Bullet Foundation is the foundation that developed the Bullet Center, which was the
yeah,
first
yeah,
Living
yeah.
Building Challenge building. I mean, Dennis organized the first Earth Day. He's just what an amazing person, and he was making a really powerful talk at a Living Future conference. This is probably like 8 or 9 years ago, and
Mhm.
talked about the urgency of the climate crisis that we face, and the work that we're all doing, and the sense that we all know that we need to figure out how to solve this thing,
Yeah,
and that we're at a moment where we all need to take the leap. And I think what's cool is what you're describing is that in terms of the preconditions for that leap, we're like, what will I think about? I mean, like I can't sleep and I'm thinking about this, I'm complaining about it, like is getting ready for that leap. And then this project that you have achieved is just a really great example of that kind of, the I'm just going to make it. It's that it takes some courage. It takes probably some not knowing what you don't know sort of aspect
Certain
as
amount of
well.
stupidity as well, right?
Right. But it's the kind of thing that we all that we all need to do, and I think it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to share that with all of us, so that so that because we all have our own leaps that we need to take now.
Yeah, totally
So
agree.
so um, tell us about the project. Like, what are the what's some of the specifics about what you chose to develop as your first passive
Hmm.
house?
Sure. It was the biggest small project I could basically bite off.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it was the first project, so it wasn't going to be a multifamily,
Hmm.
6-story building. It was probably needed to be on a single family lot. And so I said, okay, I don't even own the land yet, but I kind of have to figure out what the project's going to be before I can convince somebody to give me the money to go and design it. And so you kind of going around in loops. You have to make a couple like basic decisions. And one was, okay, the most typical lot size in Houston is 50 by 100 feet. So I'm gonna start a design that fits on that. And then, do the massing and kind of figure out what kind of square footage I can fit on it and how many units it's going to be and, what's the feel and the look of it. And then I'm going to be able to kind of do my developer back of the napkin. Okay, it's this many square feet. I think I can build it for this many dollars per square foot. I think the land's going to cost this much money. All of the soft costs, your engineering and design is going to be somewhere in this ballpark, and you start to put it together. And then, you know, it became a two home project with a, shared wall in between. It kind of looks like a giant barn almost. It's a 2-story project with a 500 square foot um, conditioned attic above each unit. So each unit basically has like a storage unit size conditioned space above it for all the HVAC equipment, your hot water, and then all of your stuff that otherwise would be in like a gross Houston garage is now in like a quiet, very comfortable environment above your heads. So you kind of move all that storage out of the garage. The front, instead of building a garage very intentionally, we didn't want to have a connected garage because that's where the worst air is, right? So we have this carport with a porch above it and a green roof next to it. So you have this like kind of beautiful outdoor space off of a private bedroom in the front that sits over a carport, and was all built intentionally separate from the structure. So there's no inside outside connection between any of that.
Hmm.
Um, but we were able to fit, as like a developer, you're trying to see what you can fit, right? And it's got 8 bedrooms on a single family lot. It's 2 4-bedroom houses. So it's very dense housing.
Yeah.
It's it doesn't feel, I ended up buying one of the homes from my company. So my family lives in one side and I sold the other, which was
Nice.
cool. But in terms of kind of like how the development was shaped, that was it. And, not building two separate structures is good, not just for, for passive house. You remove all of that exterior wall,
Right.
from that, it becomes adiabatic space. But you've also removed all those materials. And so
Hmm.
it's you save, per structure, you're saving money on material for that entire exterior wall, if that kind of makes sense. And you gain all of that, you'd be forced to have fire separation between homes. You gain all that in sellable square footage. So
Sure.
the connected townhome like model is really strong, I think, for passive house. It's just a challenge in Houston because people are so single family oriented here. They'd
Yeah.
rather have their structure 3 feet away just for the feeling
Hmm.
of being separate and having their own thing. So that was also a challenge of the project in selling it. But I can tell you firsthand, I've never heard a single sound from the other side. during construction through that thick firewall, I mean, David Edgar, my partner, would have a bandsaw going in the other living room, and you can't hear it on the side at all.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so they're hermetically sealed. They're incredibly
Yeah.
quiet. The neighborhood we ended up putting it in is pretty urban and transitioning, but it's right next to a train and a metro rail, none of which you hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the other benefits, right? But I think the real question you asked was like, what is it? What is, you know, how did you, how did that kind of get shaped? It was just the interplay of passive house, high performance design, being really careful and intentional about indoor air quality, the garage air, the thermal bridging, but also just like the economics of it and like wanting to build really dense housing. But I also like hate the 3-story greedy townhomes that go in here that I just call them proformas with windows. You know,
Yeah.
they are like literally just like a math equation turned into
Right.
architecture, and I hate that feeling. And I don't like the way that it makes our cities look. And so I was trying to maintain sort of a single family home aesthetic, even though it's a 3-story house, technically with the attic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But that was
I love
kind of
that.
how it all got shaped. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that notion of like this 3D manifestation of a somebody's spreadsheet.
That's what the 3-story townhome is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a literal box, and no one cares about first floor living. It's a garage and a throwaway
Hmm.
bedroom that's really
Yeah,
hard to use.
yeah.
In this home, we have first floor living, so we've got living room and kitchen and all of that. Like, so you don't have to climb a set of stairs just to get to those spaces. Every other townhouse ever built in Houston, you got to climb a set of stairs just to get to the places where you spend the most time.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of just a throwaway.
Yeah,
That's
and
good.
I understand those challenges of space and in urban environments, like first floors become those spaces often, but it's not the only way to do it. And so I
Hmm.
was trying to just really, and when I tell people and show people this project, they're like, "You put that in Edo, like East Downtown Houston? No, that looks like nothing over there." It's like,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
no, you're like
That's
it
the
looks
point.
like a house, but it's a townhouse. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. But
So you mentioned the saving materials with the just because you have the shared wall there and you're not doing
right.
the two separate structures. Were you able to grapple with like embodied carbon, upfront carbon in other ways on this first project, or what was the story there?
For sure. I obviously it's sort of built into passive houses. It is low carbon building just because we're talking about energy use, but I think
Hmm.
you're talking about materiality as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I I think insulation would be an easy place to start, which is we could have done, you know, spray foam is the default in this town,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
right? And this
yeah,
is a spray foam free home. There is
yeah.
not 1 ounce of this stuff in this house.
Right, right.
And that comes down to just thinking about it first and foremost, being really careful with like roof to wall connections and making sure that they're very simple in form. You don't have awkward corners and places that only a spray gun is going to get to. People have to be able to fit in to put the insulation in. So avoiding of something like spray foam and not making that the default, structurally, I probably could have put a 2x6 or a 2x8 for a rafter. Instead, I have a 2x10 because I just want to carry a bunch of inboard insulation that's not spray foam. So you just make a deeper cavity.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not a large cost to just add beefier rafters. And I basically tell everybody to do this on any project anybody talks to me about now. It's just like big rafters.
Hmm.
What a
Hmm.
concept, right?
Right, right.
Don't just spray foam it because yes, we're talking about saving embodied carbon, but at the same time, spray foam creates other problems in our buildings that people aren't aware of, like, the rotting of that structure from humidity getting in there and things like that. So,
Hmm.
um, so we made sure that we didn't have any foam in the house, spray foam. And then this is a fiberglass market, straight up. You
Yeah.
know, I considered rock wool. I think rock wool actually has an higher embodied carbon footprint than
Then
fiber.
fiberglass.
Yeah. So we considered rock wool. Rock wool cost more money, was not as available, and our installers just don't know it. So fortunately, as a developer in this town, like if you can pull off fiberglass, you have an extremely economical way to insulate a building. You can add as much of it as you want at any depth that you want,
Hmm.
and it's relatively low embodied carbon. Um, there are new products out there that we're considering for like our next project, which would be like wood infill insulation, things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But on this project for the first go, it was like you really, especially as a developer, you got to be careful challenging your trades and like where you want to challenge them
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like in what ways you want your development to do that, but also like be conscious, be like being a conscious developer and builder. And I knew that fiberglass checked enough of the boxes and was like so
Hmm.
that I didn't need to rock the boat on like that, for example. But like the shared wall did remove a bunch of fibrous, cement, sheathing or not sheathing, cladding on the outside of the project, right? It removed a good amount of zip R, right? Which
Hmm. Hmm.
has foam on it. So I have zip R3 around the walls of the house. And so saved money, saved carbon.
Yeah. Yeah. No, right on.
Yeah.
You also alluded to that the developers back of the envelope calculation, and I can imagine folks listening and being like, I've been thinking about doing my own development, and hearing this successful story. So, what sort of advice do you have for folks, or like things to look out for as you're doing that back of the envelope calculation? Are there were there I guess were there surprises for you in this first go round, or what would you alert people to make sure that they're addressing as they're trying to kind of suss out what is feasible for them?
Yeah, I would say you probably need to go get at least a basic education in real estate finance
Hmm.
and need to understand, what interest rates do to your cash flow over the period of time. And it might
Yeah.
be useful to either ask somebody for a very simple pro forma or to walk you through like what that looks like over the period of a year or 2 years,
Hmm.
just understanding what compounding interest is as a concept, what
Right.
cap
Right.
rates are as a concept. And so a little bit of financial modeling is definitely a really useful tool. I took a financial modeling course during the pandemic and it
Hmm.
proved to be incredibly useful. And I think that especially because you're not just a designer, you're not just a builder, but you also now are a business person playing with other people's money, and you need to show that you have the nomenclature and that you need to give somebody enough confidence, even if it's, your first money raise is probably going to be friends and family. They already know you. They're not investing in the project, they're investing in you. But
Hmm.
you still got to show them how you're going to pull it off with some confidence. And you're going to have to kind of have some of those skills and the presentation put together. So you're going to have to wear a lot of hats in the beginning. And by a lot, I mean pretty much all of them. So uh, just be prepared for that. I would say the back of the napkin is important. Obviously, it's a go, no go scenario where, okay, sketch it up. How many square feet can fit on a lot? How much is the lot? How much does construction cost? If you don't know those questions, you need to have a realtor in your pocket. You need to have a builder in your pocket. You need to have, and these need to be your friends, and you need to do favors for them because you're asking favors from them, right? So building your network is massive. I spent 8 years building a huge network in Houston that I pulled from
Mm.
now, and I've been nurturing and I still nurture. And it's this beautiful, give and take. And it's something that's so important in life. And your first passive house development is no exception to that, right? So You're gonna not know a lot of things and you're gonna have to ask for help.
So are you glad you made the leap, or is this something you would recommend for others?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I can't imagine a world in which I had not done it anymore.
Uh, uh-huh.
And also, the idea of building anything of lower quality is not even an option anymore. There's just,
Yeah.
it is really the question of like, do you want to build backwards or do you want to build forwards? And I don't want to go backwards in anything in life,
Hmm.
especially the buildings that now my children live in and like and that other people's children are going to live in. And we see things like Hurricane Helene pull through the United
Yeah.
States of America. And I'm like, it'd be nice if we built those communities back to a higher degree, right? And
Yeah.
so it's personally, this is the only way to go moving forward. Would I do it again in a heartbeat? Yes, I would. As hard as it was, all of it all over again, for sure. Yeah.
Well, with that, I think this is a great place to close up. Jesse, thank you for your great work and for joining us for this conversation. Really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And that was Jesse Hunt, and really enjoyed hearing that conversation and that journey. Definitely took me back. I had the absolute privilege of visiting Jesse's house at the end of the FIRST conference in Houston, and it had just been completed. So I was picturing a lot of it as he was describing it, and it is quite fantastic. Really interesting part of the world, that part of Houston. One of the things that jumped out at me was that there's no zoning. So
Mm.
it kind of works in that people tend to build houses or buildings that are similar to what's next door, but there's no guarantee of that. So it was there was sort of very dilapidated, old houses that were falling apart. And Jesse's taken a bit of a punt as a developer, as thinking that area is ripe for um, being a bit of an up and coming area. He mentioned that it's really close to a train station. It's not too far away from the city centre, so I think it's probably a fairly good gamble. But certainly, no shortage of risks in any any type of property development. But he definitely bit off quite a lot on this one. But just such a really great philosophy in general. I mean, he said it himself that a lot of the challenges and the way he approached this project kind of reflects life as well, about just you know thinking about your goals, what you want to achieve, knowing um, that there are going to be challenges and just figuring those out as you go along, and also that he wasn't happy to accept the easy option. He said right at the start, doing the easy thing just was not an option for him, and he maintained that throughout the project, knowing that this is the path that he chose, and he just had to sort of to push on through. But I thought, don't want to make it sound too overwhelming, because I think it was really great to hear right at the end where he said he wouldn't hesitate, and is I think quite looking forward to doing the next project. So certainly didn't turn him off doing that. In many ways, it just encouraged him to do it again, I think. What were your highlights?
I think, I mean, one of them is that well, first that he took the plunge and went for it. I think that is because I know just from, being part of this community and having friendships with practitioners and things over the years, that this is not an uncommon thing to think about, to like fantasize about it as you're a practitioner, being frustrated that you're not, getting that passive house work, uh, to then be thinking maybe I can develop it
Yeah,
myself. Maybe I can make this
yeah,
happen myself. And so Jesse's answer is yes, you can. And and the other thing that I thought was which plays on what you just were talking about a little bit of him not wanting to, he would not hesitate to do another one, is that he just felt like it was completely transformative for him. Like he's in a completely different place than he was before he did this project, and how powerful that is, and how empowering that must feel for Jesse and for others who walk that path.
I really like what he said about the townhouse typology, and I have this conversation quite regularly here, and it's interesting seeing the market where I am in a city that is grappling with becoming denser and housing being really expensive relative to incomes. We're one of the most expensive places in the world here in Auckland. So people are realising if they want a house, they're probably going to have a terrace house or something, a house attached to another house. There's been a lot of market resistance to that. But I think people are now realising that if you want a house, that's likely your only option. But once people actually experience it, they realise it's not as bad as they feared. And one of the most common fears is the sound and the privacy. And I have explained to many, many people that two houses that are joined together with a firewall and really good sound separation in between them is often more private and a better separation from those two living spaces than two houses that have that 3-foot gap that Jesse mentioned, because you often, in that gap and those opposing walls, you often have a window.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And then this useless space in between that either has a patch of grass that someone has to take care of, or just dead space. And they're usually just standard external walls. And I've seen this time and time again where quite large townhouses are crammed really close to each other, with this sort of pseudo separation, really, just to make the stats work and to make it so that the real estate agent can say that it's a detached house. When you'd be far better off, you'd get more floor area that's usable, and you'd actually get more privacy if they were all attached to each other with really good fire and acoustic separation, which is what you always do have when you have a townhouse. So I reflected on that seeing that transition here, and then I have to keep reminding myself that Jesse he's in Texas, and Texas, I don't know if you know about this, Zach, about Texas, but internationally it's got a bit of a reputation about things being big.
Yeah.
And everyone wanting their own space. And I think coming up against that culture change must be even a bigger challenge for Jesse in that part of the world, but he's proven that it's doable.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he was like, I'm just going to show that it can be done, and that and he was successful in selling, the other unit and moving it himself. I think another piece that stood out was the thought that he brought to the way that the space inside the townhouse would work, and recognizing that so many townhouse designs basically treat the ground floor as like a throwaway space.
That throwaway bedroom.
Yeah. And I've definitely seen that, a lot as we were looking around for houses and stuff, but particularly when you get to a typology where it's a fairly narrow house that really can be a waste of square footage. So that, that goes back down, it goes back to the concept of sufficiency and being smart and efficient with the space that you're working with, and maximizing it to be usable and useful and gracious. So
I mean, one of the things I really look for in my sort of ideological dream home would be that you could see the backyard from the kitchen bench, and these houses tick that box, because at the ground level from that carport, you walk into essentially down a sort of an entry space, but then quite quickly into the kitchen, open plan living area, and then direct connection out to a backyard. So you've got this really good connection from the street at the front through to a very private living space out the back. And I can imagine it just being an ideal space to be in for a family. And then with lots of room upstairs, for more private or quiet working spaces. So yeah, it's a different way of design, but I think it's one that absolutely would work really, really well.
Yeah. What's a kitchen bench?
Kitchen bench.
What's a kitchen bench?
A kitchen. A kitchen.
You guys have benches in your kitchens?
Well, the bench top, the kitchen. I don't know what you call it.
You call that a counter? You call that a counter? Oh, we call that a counter.
Okay.
All right.
Kitchen,
a bench.
The kitchen.
Okay. All right. Cool.
The kitchen bench or the kitchen counter is often the thing that we compete with when we're trying to up the levels of insulation.
Yeah,
because
that's right. That's right.
Stupid amounts of money on.
What are you going to be using as your countertop? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
The final thing that stood out for me, which I thought was really great advice, because it's not something that we often talk about in our network, was financial literacy. And it kind of surprised me, Jesse's answer to your question about, what would you advise people? I was expecting a nice building science answer. And he said, go and learn about real estate financing and how all that works. And I think that's a really interesting and important answer, because that's the mindset of an experienced developer. And he said a couple of times that concept of other people's money, and realizing that as a business owner, your job is to get to the next job in that financial reality. So a really important message there. It's probably not something that a lot of architects, engineers, or maybe builders think about a lot, but we probably need to run a successful business.
Yeah, no, that made so much sense.
Awesome. Really great project. Check out Emergent Development. That's emergentdev.co. Really great images there of Jesse's home and some of the other services that he provides off the back of that. And I hope he gets to do some more projects, because it'd be great to see more properties like that. We didn't really dive into it this time round, but Jesse has talked, as you mentioned, at the about humid climates, and some of the really interesting technical features of this home is the fact that it is in a warm climate, and a lot of that HVAC system and design that has gone into that has actually been about keeping cool and keeping dry, probably more so than about keeping warm. So really, lots of interesting technical stuff to geek out on if you get the opportunity to talk to Jesse or read some of the articles about this about the house. All right. Do you want to tell us a bit more about Reimagine, Zach?
Yeah, the Reimagine Buildings Collective, which we have been talking about for a few weeks now, is open. So if you want to check it out and join this group of building professionals who are stepping up to tackle climate change, visit reimaginebuildings.com. It's been a lot of fun already, and we look forward to seeing you there. There's going to be an Ask Me Anything session this week with Ed May, and a welcome event as well. So and then the PHPP Zero to Hero course is about to get underway. So lots of stuff happening there. And I guess the other thing I want to share is this Wednesday we have a Next Up edition of Passive House Accelerator Live with Shafali Sangvi and Heather McKinstry, and they're going to be talking about the case for Passive House. So this is going to be discussing how to communicate effectively about Passive House and zero carbon buildings. This actually tees up the monthly theme that we will be exploring in November, which is all about how to sell the benefits of zero carbon buildings so they actually get built. And also on your radar, hopefully, is the 2024 Green Build International Conference and Expo, which it will be featuring FIAS, a special section of the conference and programming of the conference with FIAS. That's in Philadelphia on November 12th through 15th. And tickets are available. You can visit the FIAS website to get more information about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks to Jesse for giving his time, and thanks for that interview, Zach. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back again next week on Passive House Podcast.